Ambassador Sarah Chen felt the cold metal of the conference table under her hands. The orbital station New Geneva floated in space above Earth, and right now it felt like the loneliest place in the universe. Around the table sat representatives from 12 different alien species, all staring at her with eyes that showed no mercy. The Zephyrian delegate, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke in a voice like grinding metal. The Galactic Council has made its decision. Humanity has exactly 72 standard hours to surrender all faster-than-light technology and submit to protective custody under the Zephyrian Empire. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her face calm. Protective custody? That sounds like slavery with fancy words. The Zephyrian's large black eyes narrowed. Your species developed FTL travel in only 40 years. That should have taken 1,000 years, maybe more. This violates every natural law we know. Your technology is dangerous and unpredictable. An insect-like creature from the Hive Collective clicked its mandibles in agreement. Human ships ignore basic physics. They move in ways that should be impossible. This threatens the stability of all galactic civilization. Sarah looked around, the table at faces that showed fear mixed with disgust. She had been Earth's ambassador for 10 years, but she had never seen the aliens this scared before. Our technology might be different, but we've never attacked anyone. We've followed all the Council's rules. Rules that you should not have been able to follow so quickly, said the crystalline Vekthari representative, its voice like wind chimes. Young species take centuries to understand galactic law. You learned it in decades. This is not natural. The Zephyrian stood up, all 4 arms spread wide. The decision is final. Surrender your technology and accept our protection or face complete orbital bombardment. We will not allow a dangerous anomaly to spread chaos through the galaxy. Sarah felt sweat on her forehead but kept her voice steady. And if we refuse? Then every human world will burn, the Zephyrian said simply. We have already moved our fleets into position around your colonies. Mars, Europa, Titan, the mining stations in the asteroid belt. All of them will be destroyed if you do not comply. The meeting ended with no room for discussion. Sarah watched the alien delegates file out of the room, their faces showing they believed they were saving the galaxy from humanity. She sat alone for a long moment, then activated her emergency communicator. Priority Alpha message to Earth Command. The ultimatum has been delivered. We have 72 hours. Back on Earth, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in the old NORAD facility, Admiral Marcus Webb received Sarah's message. He was a man in his 60s with gray hair and scars on his hands from his days as a fighter pilot. Around him, the command center buzzed with activity as officers prepared for what everyone hoped would never come. Webb's second-in-command, Colonel Maria Santos, approached with a grim expression. Sir, our long-range sensors are picking up massive fleet movements. The Zephyrians weren't bluffing. They have over 300 ships moving toward our colonies. Webb nodded slowly. He had expected this day for 20 years, but that didn't make it easier. What about the other Council species? Mixed reactions, Santos replied. The Altarians and some of the smaller species are protesting the ultimatum. They think it's too harsh. But the Zephyrians have the biggest fleet, and the Hive Collective is supporting them. If it comes to a fight, we're outnumbered 50-1. Webb looked at the tactical displays showing human colonies scattered across local space. Each dot of light represented millions of lives, people who had left Earth to build new homes among the stars. The thought of them being turned to ash made his stomach twist. Sir, called out Lieutenant Kim from the communications station. We're getting panic signals from all the colonies. People are demanding evacuation ships. The civilian government is asking what our military response will be. Webb knew that Earth's official military consisted of about 200 ships. Destroyers, cruisers, and a few battleships that used standard galactic technology. They were decent vessels, but against a full Council fleet, they would last maybe an hour. But Earth had other ships that most people didn't know about. Colonel Santos, please clear the room. Security level black. Only personnel with deep shadow clearance stay. Santos looked surprised but nodded. You heard the Admiral. Everyone without black clearance out. Now. The bustling command center emptied until only 12 people remained. These were the officers who knew Earth's greatest secret, the one that had shaped human space policy for 50 years. Webb walked to a sealed wall panel and placed his hand on a scanner. The panel slid away to reveal a crystal device that pulsed with strange inner light. It didn't look like human technology because it wasn't entirely human. Ladies and gentlemen, Webb said quietly, you all know why you're here. 50 years ago, humanity made contact with something that changed everything. Not the Galactic Council, something older, something that's been waiting for this day. Colonel Santos stepped forward. Sir, are you sure? Once we activate Deep Shadow, there's no going back. The whole galaxy will know what we really are. Webb thought about Sarah Chen sitting alone on that space station, surrounded by aliens who saw humanity as a disease to be cured. He thought about children playing in the domed cities of Mars, unaware that death was coming for them. He thought about the promise his predecessor had made 50 years ago to entities that existed in the spaces between stars. The Watchers warned us this would happen, he said. They told us the Council would eventually see us as a threat. They gave us the tools to survive, but only if we were willing to use them. He looked around at the faces of his most trusted officers. These men and women had spent their careers preparing for a war most of humanity didn't even know was possible. The Shadow Fleet has been hidden for 5 decades, waiting in spaces that don't technically exist. Ships that can fight battles in multiple dimensions at once. Technology that makes our enemies' weapons look like toys. But using it means revealing that humanity has been lying to the galaxy for half a century. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, the youngest officer in the room, spoke up. What about the civilian government? The president doesn't even know about Deep Shadow. Webb smiled grimly. The president will learn along with everyone else. This decision is too important to be left to politicians. He placed his hand on the crystal device. It felt warm, almost alive, and seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The technology was partly human engineering, partly something else. Knowledge given by beings that existed in the void between realities. Colonel Santos, send word to all Shadow Fleet commanders. Operation Deep Shadow is now active. Authorization code Web 77 Alpha. Santos hesitated for just a moment. Sir, once those ships decloak, the entire galactic balance of power changes. Are we really ready for that kind of responsibility? Webb looked at the tactical display one more time. Somewhere out there, Zephyrian fleets were moving toward human colonies with weapons that could crack planets. The Galactic Council had decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist freely. They had no idea how right they were. Open the gate, Webb said, and pressed his hand firmly against the crystal. Deep in space, in dimensions that folded through, reality like origami made of starlight, ancient mechanisms began to wake up. The Shadow Fleet had been sleeping for 50 years. Now it was time to remind the galaxy why some doors should never be opened. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been dead for 3 years, but her recorded message still played in the Deep Shadow briefing room. Her image flickered on the holographic display, showing a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly from too much coffee. Personal log, Dr. Elena Vasquez, Quantum Physics Division, date March 15, 2157. Today I broke the universe. Well, not broke exactly, more like. Knocked on its door, and something answered. Admiral Webb paused the recording and looked around at his senior staff. They had all seen this message before, but it never got easier to watch. Dr. Vasquez had died in her sleep at the age of 87, taking most of her secrets with her. Continue the recording, Colonel Santos said quietly. The hologram flickered back to life. Dr. Vasquez rubbed her face and continued speaking. The mathematical models for faster-than-light travel all pointed to the same problem. You can't move through space faster than light. The energy requirements are impossible. But what if you don't move through space at all? What if you step outside of it? The recording shifted to show equations floating in the air around Dr. Vasquez. The math was so complex that only a few dozen humans could understand it even now, 50 years later. I was trying to create a small dimensional fold, just big enough to send a probe through. The theory said it would work for maybe a microsecond before collapsing. Instead, I tore a hole in space-time that stayed open for 6 hours. Webb remembered the classified reports from that day. Half of Montana had experienced a brief aurora display, and sensitive equipment around the world had detected gravity waves unlike anything ever recorded. That's when they came through, Dr. Vasquez continued. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. The Watchers. They don't have bodies like us. They exist in the spaces between realities, in dimensions that fold through our universe like threads through cloth. The recording showed what looked like geometric shapes made of light, constantly shifting and changing. Looking at them too long made Webb's eyes water even now. They told me things. Terrible things. The galaxy isn't what we think it is. The Galactic Council, all those advanced civilizations, they're not the top of the food chain. They're cattle. Colonel Santos shifted uncomfortably. Sir, should we really be showing this to the new officers? Webb looked at the dozen junior officers seated around the table. They had all been selected for deep shadow clearance, but this was their first time learning the full truth. Most of them looked like they wanted to run. They need to know, Webb said. Continue the recording. Dr. Vasquez appeared to be reading from notes that only she could see. The Devourers have been consuming realities for eons. They eat entire universes, starting from the edges and working inward. Our galaxy is already partly infected. Systems disappearing at the rim, stars going dark, whole civilizations vanishing without a trace. The Council knows, but they hide it. They tell their people it's natural stellar phenomena. One of the junior officers, Lieutenant Park, raised her hand. Sir, if that's true, why doesn't the Council fight back? Webb paused the recording again. Because they can't. Their technology, their entire way of thinking, it's designed for stability and peace. The Devourers feed on that kind of stagnation. The more organized and calm a civilization becomes, the easier it is for them to consume. But humans are different, Colonel Santos added. We're chaotic, unpredictable, violent when we need to be. That makes us immune to some of the Devourers' weapons. Webb started the recording again. Dr. Vasquez looked directly at the camera with an expression of grim determination. The Watchers made me an offer. They would teach humanity how to build ships that exist in multiple dimensions at once. Vessels that can hide in pocket realities and fight battles across several planes of existence simultaneously. In exchange, we would become the galaxy's hidden guardians. The recording shifted to show blueprints for ships unlike anything in human or alien technology. They looked wrong somehow, as if the designs hurt to look at directly. The first prototype will be called Prometheus Unbound. It will take 20 years to build and require materials that don't technically exist in our reality. But if we succeed, humanity will have the power to fight enemies that the entire Galactic Council cannot defeat. Webb stopped the recording there. The junior officers sat in stunned silence trying to process what they had learned. Lieutenant Park spoke first. Sir, how many people know about this? Besides everyone in this room, maybe 50 people worldwide, Webb replied. The President doesn't know. Most of Congress doesn't know. Even most of our military leadership believes the Shadow Fleet is just a theoretical project. What about the colonies? Asked Lieutenant Chen. Mars, Europa, the mining stations? They know they have hidden defenses, but not the full extent, Santos explained. Each colony has at least one shadow gate hidden in their system. If the gates open, our ships can appear anywhere in local space within minutes. Webb activated the room's main tactical display. It showed the local area of the galaxy with human colonies marked in blue and Zephyrian fleets marked in red. The red dots far outnumbered the blue ones. Right now, the enemy fleets are moving into position around our colonies. They think they're dealing with a primitive species that got lucky with FTL technology. They have no idea that we've been preparing for this fight for 50 years. Above Earth's moon, something impossible was happening. Space itself seemed to twist and fold like fabric being stretched. A hole opened in reality, and through it came a ship that shouldn't exist. The Prometheus Unbound was 3 kilometers long and seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Its hull was covered with patterns that hurt to look at, and it cast shadows in directions that made no geometric sense. Anyone watching would swear the ship existed in more than 3 dimensions at the same time. Captain Lisa Morrison stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound and felt reality shift around her. After 5 years of commanding a shadow ship, she had learned to ignore the way normal physics bent and twisted around the vessel. Her crew had been selected for their ability to think in multiple dimensions and fight battles that existed across several realities at once. Captain, called out her navigation officer, we're fully materialized in normal space. All Shadow Fleet vessels are reporting successful deployment. Morrison looked at her tactical display and smiled. 27 shadow ships had just appeared around Earth, each one emerging from its own dimensional pocket. To anyone watching from the planet's surface, it would look like the vessels had simply blinked into existence from nowhere. Communications, open a channel to Admiral Webb. Channel open, Captain. Admiral, Shadow Fleet is deployed and ready. What are your orders? Webb's voice crackled through the speakers with barely contained excitement. Captain Morrison, 50 years ago we made a promise to defend humanity against threats the galaxy doesn't even know exist. Today we keep that promise. Prepare to engage Zephyrian forces approaching Earth space. Morrison felt a familiar chill run down her spine. The Shadow Fleet had trained for this moment, but training was different from real combat. They were about to reveal humanity's greatest secret to the entire galaxy. All shadow vessels, this is Prometheus Unbound. Deploy for combat operations. Remember, we exist in multiple realities simultaneously. Use that advantage. Around Earth's moon, 27 ships began to fade in and out of existence like ghosts made of metal and energy. They moved in ways that violated every law of physics the Galactic Council understood. In deep space, Zephyrian Admiral Kextar was reviewing his battle plans when his sensor officer made a sound of confusion. "Admiral, we're detecting energy signatures around Earth, multiple contacts appearing and disappearing. Our sensors can't get a solid lock." Kextar's forearms flexed with annoyance. "Sensor malfunction?" "No, sir, the readings are consistent across all our ships. There are definitely vessels near Earth, but they're strange. They seem to exist in several dimensions at once." Kextar felt a cold fear creep into his thoughts. In 300 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The human ships they knew about were simple, predictable vessels using standard galactic technology. This was something else entirely. "Change of plans," he ordered. "All fleets converge on Earth immediately. Whatever the humans are hiding, we destroy it now." Admiral Kextar had commanded fleets for 3 centuries, but he had never seen anything like the sensor readings coming from Earth space. His tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Velnok, kept adjusting the instruments with increasing frustration. "Admiral, the human vessels are definitely there, but our targeting systems can't lock onto them. They phase in and out of normal space like they're jumping between dimensions." Kextar studied the holographic display showing Earth's moon. Strange ships flickered around it like ghosts, there one moment and gone the next. When they did appear, they looked wrong, too angular, casting shadows that went in impossible directions. "How many ships are we detecting?" "Impossible to say with certainty, sir. Anywhere from 20 to 50, maybe more hiding in whatever dimensional pockets they're using." A communication alert sounded across the bridge. Velnok looked at his panel with surprise. "Admiral, we're receiving a broadcast on all galactic frequencies. It's coming from the largest human vessel." "Put it on screen." The main display showed a human male in his 60s wearing a dark blue uniform. Behind him, the bridge of his ship seemed to bend and twist in ways that made Kextar's eyes hurt. "I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Force Shadow Fleet," the human said calmly. "I am broadcasting this message to all Galactic Council species because it's time you learned the truth your leaders have been hiding from you." Kextar felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the desperate plea he had expected from a doomed species. For the past 50 years, humanity has been aware of a threat that makes our current dispute seem trivial. At the edges of our galaxy, entire star systems are disappearing. Your council calls this natural stellar phenomena. We call it what it is: an invasion. The display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the galactic rim. Whole sectors of space appeared to be simply missing, as if something had eaten the stars themselves. The entities responsible for this destruction are called devourers. They consume entire realities starting from the edges and working inward. Your galaxy has been under attack for over 1,000 years, and your leaders know it. On ships throughout the Zephyrian fleet, officers stared at the impossible data. Several captains were already requesting confirmation from their home worlds. Admiral Webb continued his broadcast. "Humanity was contacted 50 years ago by survivors of previous galactic cycles, beings we call the Watchers. They offered us the technology to fight the Devourers, technology that allows our ships to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Kextar activated his command channel. "Fleet Command, I need immediate confirmation of this data about missing star systems." The reply came back within minutes. "Admiral, we are reviewing the classified files. Stand by for further orders." On the screen, Admiral Webb had been joined by what looked like shifting geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Directly, when they spoke, their voices sounded like mathematics given sound. "We are the Watchers," they said. "We have survived the death of 17 galaxies. The cycle always repeats. Young species develop technology, join peaceful councils, and stagnate into easy prey. Only species with sufficient chaos and adaptability can resist the Devourer's influence." Kextar felt sick. 300 years of military service, and no one had ever told him about any of this. "Humanity possesses the psychological characteristics necessary for dimensional warfare," the Watchers continued. "They think in patterns that the Devourers cannot predict or consume. This is why their technology developed so rapidly. This is why their ships violate your understanding of physics. The broadcast shifted again, showing massive organic shapes moving through space toward the galaxy's populated regions. They looked like living ships, but wrong somehow, as if they existed partially outside normal reality. Long-range sensors are detecting the first major Devourer incursion fleet, Admiral Webb announced. 17 star systems on the outer rim have gone dark in the past week. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the major population centers within 2 years. Kekstar's communication officer was receiving frantic messages from across the fleet. Admiral, we're getting reports from our deep space stations. Sensor posts along the rim have been going offline. Command initially thought it was equipment failures, but now we know better, Kekstar finished grimly. The human admiral looked directly at the camera with an expression of grim determination. The Galactic Council has 72 hours to make a choice. You can continue to deny the threat and attempt to destroy humanity, or you can accept our help and prepare to fight for the survival of every living thing in this galaxy. The broadcast ended, leaving Kekstar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Admiral, Velnok said quietly, what are your orders? Before Kekstar could answer, alarms began blaring across the ship. The sensor officer called out in panic. Admiral, new contacts entering the system, unknown vessel types, massive energy signatures. They're not using any technology in our databases. The main tactical display showed shapes emerging from the outer edge of the solar system. They moved like living things, flowing through space, rather than flying. Their hulls seemed to absorb light, making them appear as holes cut out of the stars. Devourers, Kekstar whispered. The lead creature was the size of a small moon, its surface covered with what looked like organic technology. Behind it came dozens of smaller vessels, each one large enough to destroy a planet. Fleet-wide alert, Kekstar commanded. All ships to battle stations. Prepare to engage unknown hostiles. But even as he gave the order, he knew his conventional weapons would be useless. The Devourers existed partially outside normal space, just like the human ships but in a completely different way. On the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, Captain Morrison watched the Devourer fleet approach with cold professional interest. She had trained for this moment for years, but seeing the enemy in person was still terrifying. Captain, her tactical officer reported, the Zephyrian fleet is moving to intercept the Devourers. They're brave, but their weapons won't work. Morrison nodded. All shadow vessels prepare for dimensional combat. Remember, the Devourers feed on organized energy and structured thought. Keep your minds chaotic and unpredictable. She opened a channel to the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Kekstar, this is Captain Morrison of the Prometheus Unbound. Your conventional weapons will not be effective against these targets. We need to coordinate our attack. Kekstar's image appeared on her screen, his forearms spread in a gesture of reluctant acceptance. Captain Morrison, we had no idea. Your Admiral Webb, is his data accurate? Every word, Morrison replied. The Devourers have been consuming galaxies since before your species learned to use fire. They've been working on this one for 1,000 years, starting from the outer edges. What do you need from us? Morrison looked at her tactical display. The human shadow fleet was outnumbered, but they had advantages the Devourers wouldn't expect. They could exist in multiple dimensions, strike from angles that didn't exist in normal space, and think in patterns that confused entities used to consuming organized civilizations. Stay back and provide sensor data, she said. Your ships can track them in normal space while we attack from dimensional angles they can't defend against. But Admiral, when this battle is over, everything changes. The galaxy will need to prepare for a war unlike anything in recorded history. Kekstar looked older than his 3 centuries. I understand, Captain. Do what you must. The first Devourer creature reached the outer edge of Earth's defensive perimeter, and suddenly found itself under attack from weapons that struck across multiple realities simultaneously. The human ships phased in and out of existence, hitting the invader from angles that shouldn't exist. But the Devourers were ancient and cunning. As the battle began in earnest, they started to adapt to human tactics with frightening speed. Captain Morrison realized with growing horror that even humanity's advantages might not be enough. The enemy had been consuming realities for eons. They had faced dimensional fighters before. The real war was just beginning, and humanity was about to learn that being the galaxy's hidden guardians came with a price that might be too high to pay. The first Devourer ship exploded across 7 dimensions simultaneously, but 3 more took its place, their organic hulls already adapting to human weapons. In the depths of space, ancient evil had finally found Earth. The battle at Earth's outer perimeter lasted 6 hours and changed everything. Captain Morrison watched from the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound as the last Devourer scout ship dissolved into multiple dimensions, its organic hull finally unable to adapt to human dimensional weapons. But the victory felt hollow. They had destroyed 12 enemy vessels, but not before the Devourers had transmitted everything they learned back to their main fleet. The next attack would be much harder. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving priority messages from across the galaxy. The Council species are panicking." Morrison wasn't surprised. The battle had been broadcast on all channels, showing the galaxy exactly what humanity had been hiding. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions, weapons that struck across realities, and enemies that consumed starlight itself. "Put Admiral Webb on screen." Webb appeared on the main display, looking exhausted but determined. Behind him, the command center buzzed with activity as officers coordinated with fleets across human space. "Captain, we're getting responses from every major species in the galaxy. Some are terrified of us, others are demanding our help, and a few are still insisting this is all some elaborate human trick." "What about the Zephyrians?" Morrison asked. "Admiral Kextar is requesting an immediate meeting. He wants to discuss alliance terms." Webb paused. "The attack on the Outer Rim systems has accelerated. We're losing entire star systems every few hours now." Morrison nodded grimly. The Devourers had been testing the galaxy's defenses for centuries, but humanity's revelation had changed their timeline. They were no longer content to slowly consume the galaxy from the edges. "Admiral, we need to establish a war council. The Shadow Fleet can't fight this alone." "Already in progress. I'm ordering all available Shadow vessels to rendezvous at the coordinates I'm sending you. We're going to try something that's never been attempted before." 3 days later, Captain Morrison found herself aboard a massive space station that hadn't existed the week before. The Watchers had constructed it in a pocket dimension between realities, large enough to hold representatives from every major galactic species. The station's architecture was impossible. Corridors that folded back on themselves, rooms that were bigger inside than outside, and gravity that worked in whatever direction was most convenient. Human engineers had tried to understand the construction methods but given up after their brains started hurting. Admiral Webb stood at the center of the main conference room, addressing delegates from 47 different species. Many of them still looked terrified of the humans, but terror of the Devourers was stronger. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of various biological classifications," Webb began. "We are here to discuss the defense of our galaxy against an enemy that has consumed 17 previous galactic civilizations." The Altarian delegate, a tall humanoid with silver skin and large black eyes, raised her hand. "Admiral Webb, our scientists have analyzed the sensor data from the recent battle. These Devourer creatures, and they appear to exist partially outside normal spacetime. How is this possible?" One of the Watchers materialized next to Webb, its geometric form shifting constantly. "The Devourers are what remain of a species that transcended physical reality eons ago. They achieved perfect order, perfect peace, perfect stagnation. This made them easy prey for entities from the void between universes. They were consumed and transformed," another Watcher added. "Now they serve as antibodies for the cosmic immune system, activated whenever a galaxy becomes too contaminated with complex consciousness." The Zephyrian Admiral Kextar leaned forward, his forearms clasped nervously. "You're saying that advancement and intelligence automatically doom a species?" "Not advancement," Webb corrected. "Stagnation. The Devourers feed on predictability, on societies that have achieved stability and stopped changing. They can't consume chaos, creativity, or aggressive adaptation." A delegate from the peaceful meditation worlds looked horrified. "But our entire civilization is built on inner peace and harmony. Are you saying we're doomed?" The Watchers flickered with what might have been sympathy. "Not necessarily, but you will need to learn to be unpredictable. You will need to embrace change, conflict, and chaos. You will need to become more like humans." The room erupted in shocked chatter. Several species had built their entire cultures around avoiding the kind of aggressive unpredictability that humans displayed naturally. Webb raised his hand for silence. "I know this is difficult to accept, but we don't have time for a gradual cultural shift. The Devourers are advancing faster than ever before." We estimate they'll reach the core systems within 18 months. What do you propose? Asked the crystalline Vekthari representative. Integration, Webb said simply. We need to upgrade your fleets with dimensional technology, but the process requires crews to undergo psychological conditioning that will fundamentally change how they think. He activated a holographic display showing human and alien ships side by side. The alien vessels had been modified with technology that made them look like they were half-melted, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Watchers can install dimensional drives on your ships, but your crews will need to learn to think in patterns that violate everything you know about logic and order. They'll need to become comfortable with existing in several realities at once. Admiral Kextar studied the display with professional interest. What are the side effects of this conditioning? Personality changes, Webb admitted. Increased aggression, unpredictability, and creativity. Some species adapt better than others. Humans took to it naturally, but more organized species struggle. The meditation world's delegate looked sick. You're asking us to abandon everything that makes us who we are. I'm asking you to evolve, Webb replied. The Devourers have consumed 17 galaxies because every species eventually chooses death over change. We're giving you a third option. Over the next several hours, Webb and the Watchers explained the full scope of what was required. Ships would need to be rebuilt with technology that existed in multiple dimensions. Crews would need psychological conditioning that would make them think more like humans. Chaotic, unpredictable, and aggressive when necessary. Most disturbing of all, entire populations would need to embrace controlled chaos to avoid becoming easy targets for devourer consumption. How long do we have to decide on? Asked the Altarian delegate. Before Webb could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A human officer rushed into the conference room with a look of panic. Admiral, we're receiving emergency signals from the hegemony of stars. Their entire core fleet is under attack by a massive devourer force. They're requesting immediate assistance. Webb felt his blood turn cold. The hegemony controlled over 300 star systems and had the largest military in the galaxy after the Zephyrians. If they fell, the psychological impact alone might cause other species to surrender. How many ships do they have in the area? Over 2,000 vessels, sir. But according to their transmissions, conventional weapons are completely ineffective. They're being slaughtered. Webb looked around the conference room at the faces of delegates from across the galaxy. Some showed determination, others terror, and a few still seemed to be in denial about the entire situation. Ladies and gentlemen, decision time has arrived earlier than expected. The hegemony of stars is about to become the first major galactic power to fall to the Devourers. We can either help them with everything we have, or we can watch them die and hope we have enough time to prepare. Admiral Kextar stood up, all four arms spread in a gesture of resolution. Admiral Webb, the Zephyrian Empire formally requests immediate integration with your dimensional technology. Our crews will undergo whatever conditioning is necessary. The Altarian delegate nodded agreement. The Altarian Republic also requests assistance. Our scientists are prepared to begin modifications immediately. One by one, representatives from across the galaxy made the same decision. Even the meditation worlds, despite their philosophical objections, recognized that survival required change. Webb felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, but he had hoped it would never come. Now they were asking entire civilizations to abandon their fundamental nature and become something more like humans. Chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerous. All right then, he said. Operation Galactic Chaos is now active. We're going to save the hegemony of stars, and then we're going to teach the entire galaxy how to fight a war that exists in multiple dimensions at once. The Watchers flickered with approval. This is what we hoped for. Chaos spreads faster than order. If you can corrupt enough species with unpredictability, the Devourers will find this galaxy indigestible. Webb smiled grimly. In other words, we're going to save civilization by making everyone a little bit more human. The largest fleet in galactic history began forming around the impossible space station as humanity prepared to export its greatest gift to the stars, the ability to be completely wonderfully unpredictable. The final battle began at the galaxy's core, where ancient stars had been burning since the universe was young. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the fight that would determine the fate of every living thing in local space. Over 12,000 ships floated in formation around the galactic center. Human shadow vessels flickered in and out of existence alongside modified alien cruisers that now existed in multiple dimensions. Zephyrian battleships had been rebuilt with technology that made their hulls ripple like liquid metal. Even the peaceful ships from the meditation worlds now bristled with weapons that could strike across several realities at once. "Admiral," Captain Morrison reported from her position at the tactical station, "all fleets report ready for dimensional combat. The conditioning programs have been mostly successful." Webb nodded grimly. The psychological modifications required for dimensional warfare had changed every species in the galaxy. Peaceful civilizations had learned to embrace controlled aggression. Orderly societies had been taught to value chaos and unpredictability. The process had been traumatic for many, but it was the only way to fight enemies that fed on stagnation. "What's our assessment of crew adaptation?" Humans and species with similar psychological profiles adapted easily. The Altarians and most humanoid species took to it within weeks. The Zephyrians were more difficult. Their four-armed biology made them naturally more organized, but they managed. The real problems were with the hive minds and the purely logical species. Webb looked at the tactical display showing the enemy force approaching the galactic core. The Devourers had abandoned all pretense of slow consumption. Their mothership was the size of a small moon, surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels that looked like living cancer growing through space. The Hive Collective lost about 30% of their crews to psychological breakdown, asking individuals to think chaotically when they're used to shared consciousness. It nearly destroyed their entire command structure, but the survivors are some of our most effective fighters now. The communications officer interrupted. "Admiral, we're receiving a final transmission from Dr. Elena Vasquez's archive files. It was programmed to activate when sensors detected a Devourer mothership." Webb felt a chill. Dr. Vasquez had died 3 years ago, but she had spent her final decades preparing for this exact moment. "Put it on screen." The holographic display showed Dr. Vasquez as she had been in her 80s, frail, but with eyes that still burned with fierce intelligence. Behind her, impossible equations floated in the air like frozen mathematics. "If you're watching this message, it means the Devourers have committed their mothership to battle. This is what we've been preparing for. The entity you're facing isn't just a ship. It's a living piece of the void between universes given form and purpose." Webb watched his officers react to the recording. Even after years of fighting dimensional wars, the idea of facing something that existed before their universe was born was terrifying. "The mothership exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously," Dr. Vasquez continued. "Conventional attacks, even dimensional weapons, can only damage a fraction of its structure. But I've discovered something during my 50 years of research. The Devourers have a weakness they don't know about." The equations behind her shifted and changed, showing mathematical relationships that hurt to look at directly. "They've become too perfect, too organized, too dependent on order and predictability. If you can create enough chaos in the right dimensional frequencies, you can make their entire structure collapse into itself." The recording paused and Dr. Vasquez looked directly at the camera with an expression of grim determination. "I've spent the last decade of my life building a weapon that shouldn't exist. The Chaos Generator. It's hidden in the quantum structure of every shadow gate we've ever built. When activated simultaneously, they'll create a dimensional maze that traps anything too organized to adapt." Webb felt his heart skip. "She never told us about this. The weapon will trap the Devourers, but it will also trap any ship or structure that's too orderly, too predictable. That's why every species in the galaxy needed psychological conditioning. That's why you all had to learn to think like humans." The recording shifted to show a schematic of the entire galaxy, with lines of energy connecting every human colony and shadow gate. "When I activate the Chaos Generator, every shadow gate will open at once, creating a dimensional web across the entire galaxy. Anything too organized will be pulled into pocket realities where the laws of physics become negotiable. The Devourers will be trapped, but so will any species that hasn't learned to embrace unpredictability." Webb realized with growing horror what she was saying. The weapon wasn't just designed to trap the Devourers. It was a test for every species in the galaxy. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "the enemy mothership is beginning its attack on the galactic core. If it reaches the central black hole, it can destabilize spacetime across the entire galaxy." Webb looked at the tactical display. The Devourer mothership was approaching the massive black hole that served as the gravitational anchor for their entire region of space. If it succeeded in corrupting that singularity, reality itself would begin unraveling outward in a cascade that would consume every inhabited world. "All fleets, begin the attack. Remember, we exist in multiple dimensions. Use that advantage. The largest battle in galactic history began as 12,000 ships engaged the Devourer force in combat that existed across 17 different realities simultaneously. Human shadow vessels phased through normal space, striking the enemy from angles that couldn't exist. Modified alien ships fired weapons that bent through dimensions, hitting targets that were hiding in pocket realities. But the Devourers were ancient and cunning. Their smaller ships began adapting to the mixed fleet's tactics, evolving defenses that could handle dimensional attacks. The mothership itself seemed immune to conventional weapons, its hull absorbing energy blasts and converting them into something that existed outside normal physics. "Admiral," Captain Morrison reported, "we're losing ships faster than we're damaging the enemy. The mothership is too large and too well defended." Webb watched the battle unfold with growing desperation. Even with humanity's advantages and the modified alien fleets, they were facing an enemy that had consumed 17 galaxies. The Devourers had seen every possible tactic, every conceivable strategy, but they had never faced anything like what Dr. Vasquez had built. "All fleets, fall. Back to minimum safe distance," Webb ordered. "Prepare for chaos generator activation." He walked to the sealed panel that contained the crystalline control device given to humanity by the Watchers 50 years ago. This time, the crystal pulsed with energy that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Sir," Colonel Santos said quietly, "are you sure about this? We don't know exactly what the chaos generator will do to our own fleets." Webb thought about Earth, with its chaotic weather and unpredictable human cities. He thought about the colonies scattered across space, full of people who had learned to adapt and change and grow in ways that other species found frightening. He thought about children playing in the domed cities of Mars, unaware that their ability to be completely unpredictable was what would save them. "Humanity has been preparing for this moment for 50 years, he said. "We've learned to be comfortable with chaos. Our allies have been conditioned to think more like us. If anyone can survive a weapon designed to destroy order itself, it's us." He placed his hand on the crystal and felt reality shift around him. Across the galaxy, every shadow gate began to open simultaneously. The network that humanity had built over 5 decades activated as one, creating a dimensional maze that spanned thousands of light years. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The Devourer mothership, with its perfect organization and predictable structure, suddenly found itself being pulled into pocket realities where the laws of physics were written by chaotic human imagination. Its smaller ships, adapted for consuming orderly civilizations, began dissolving as they encountered dimensional spaces where cause and effect operated on principles of pure unpredictability. Most of the galactic fleet survived. Ships crewed by beings who had learned to embrace chaos and change found themselves able to navigate the dimensional maze. But vessels with crews who hadn't fully adapted to the psychological conditioning were pulled into pocket realities, their orderly structures too rigid to exist in spaces designed by chaotic minds. The battle lasted 18 hours across multiple dimensions, but in the end, the Devourers were trapped. Their mothership existed in a pocket reality where every law of physics changed randomly every few seconds. Their fleet was scattered across dimensional spaces where organization itself was impossible. Webb stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, watching the tactical display show the aftermath of the largest battle in galactic history. The immediate threat was over, but everything had changed. "Admiral," Captain Morrison reported, "final casualty reports are coming in. We lost about 20% of the fleet, mostly ships whose crews hadn't fully adapted to dimensional thinking. But sir, we won." Webb nodded, but he felt no satisfaction.